Hey guys, how's it going? Robert Warshak here. In this video, we're going to talk about what I think are the best / easiest decks to hit legend with. It doesn't always have to be legend. If your goal is rank 5, these decks should do it. If your goal is rank 1 or 2, the deck should do it. If your goal is rank 10 or 15, these decks should definitely do it. I just meant it as a, these decks are very good, very powerful, have proven themselves to be consistent enough to make it into this spot. I kind of had a checklist when going over these decks, and I'll talk about that as we move through the decks and kind of what they all have in common with one another, and also what kind of separates them apart from one another that would stray you to play one deck over the other. So without further ado, let's take a look at our first deck, and that's going to be the Master's Call Hunter, or some call it the Midrange Hunter. It's a deck that was actually recently popped up. When the expansion dropped, we only saw Secret Hunter and we only saw Spell Hunter. But when more and more people started playing some of these decks, they're like, wait, Dire Frenzy is really good. Oh wait, Master's Call is really good. Oh wait, this deck is really good with Timberwolf and Springpaw and Tundra Rhino, and holy crap, the damage I can do with Scavenging Hyena. So this deck, very, very fast, starts off very early by playing a bunch of minions in the early game. Most of the time you have a 1-drop into 2-drop into 3-drop into 4-drop. There's normally, in the first 6 turns of the game, maybe one of those turns you don't have like a great play, but most of the time you're going to have a pretty optimal play turns 1 through 6. And what, if you look at the deck list, you see, well, wait, Rob, you know, what happens after turn 6? Savannah Highmane's cool and all. It's the best Hunter Legendary to ever be printed, besides Rexxar. But how does it compete with control decks? And the thing is, Deathstalker Rexxar, a lot of these Hunters were playing a lot of late game cards and at the beginning, but then they realized Deathstalker Rexxar is a late game card in itself. It's a singular card that it allows your deck to go toe to toe with control decks, which is absolutely insane. There's no other card in the game that when you play it, your deck turns into a control deck because you're able to summon a minion of almost your choice every single turn. So not only does this deck have an exceedingly powerful early game, it has an exceedingly powerful late game, and that's what makes this deck so good right now, is the fact that it has a great early game, great amount of burst damage, has good draw, able to go into the mid game, able to go into the late game, and it costs 3,100 dust. I mean, that's just a great price for a great deck, and that's why we're seeing so much of this deck on ladder right now, almost more so than the Deathrattle Hunter, which in my opinion is probably the best deck on ladder right now. But this definitely puts up a good fight towards that kind of like #1 spot as being just like the best, well-rounded, cheapest, easiest legend deck right now. So this great contender for those of you who are budget players, free-to-play players, or even beginner players. I mean, this deck right here is a great marker for you guys to start striving towards and building on, to just overall be able to get the rank that you're looking for in ladder. Granted, rank shouldn't be everything. #1 thing should be to try to improve and get better at the game. But of course, you know, getting ranks is what is exciting about it, right? Getting to rank 15, 10, 5, legend for the first time is always like the thrill of that is very satisfying. The next deck we're going to cover is going to be the Even Shaman. Again, this isn't going to be as cheap as the Hunter deck that we just covered, but it is going to be a very powerful deck, a deck that we've seen participate in many tournaments over the past couple metas. The deck really hasn't changed in itself. It has a lot of 2-drops, a lot of 4-drops, a lot of 6-drops, a lot of 8-drops, and with it being the Even Shaman, of course, there's no odd cards, so the fluctuation of turns will be like, you know, turn 1 is just the hero power, not that powerful. Turn 2 is, you know, very powerful because you have a lot of great 2-drops in the deck. We've got, you know, Flame Tongue Totem, Knife Juggler, Spark Eel, which is fantastic, Primal Fin. Turn 3 is normally a combination of maybe a hero power and a minion, so you have like your big spike turns where you're able to play your very powerful minions, and then your, you know, not so spike turns where you combo a minion with a hero power. But a 1-mana totem is essentially powerful because the totems are overall pretty good. Getting Taunt Totem, Healing Totem, Spell Power Totem are all good in different situations, and that's what really makes Even Shaman powerful, because like just paying 1 mana to basically get a minion that combos well with Knife Juggler, Flame Tongue Totem, Earthen Might, Dire Wolf Alpha. I mean, it's just really, really good. On top of that, this deck has great early game, as we can see, great mid game, and great late game, and I don't want to say it's a recent inclusion, but a really annoying card that I think puts this deck a little over the edge, and what makes it as good as it is if you get Corpse Taker. If you, let's say you have a coin on, you know, 3 and you coin out a Corpse Taker and they can't really deal with a Corpse Taker, I have a feeling that a lot of games when this happens, If you go Corpse Taker and you put a Flame Tongue Totem next to it, or a Dire Wolf, or you Earthen Might it, being able to basically attack for 10 damage on turn 4 or 5, depending on if you coined it out or not, is very powerful, because as you know, the Corpse Taker takes the abilities of your Alakir Windlord, so it gets Divine Shield, Taunt, Wind Fury, sometimes even gets Lifesteal because you have Vicious Scalehide in the deck. So there's just, it has the ability to run away with games, just like as we remember Zoo, Face Hunter, Midrange Hunter. It's got the same sort of like play a minion, play a minion, play a minion. Oh, you don't deal with it, I win the game. So a lot of decks that have that are able to cheese out victories, and we'll cover a couple more that have that same sort of like, if you don't deal with it, I'm gonna win, you have to deal with it. So you're either the one, you know, the control deck that's, you have the answers, and you continuously have the answers until your opponent runs out of steam, or you're the one pressing, you know, do you have the answer? Do you have the answer? If you don't, I win. And this is just one of those decks. Granted, again, it's on the more expensive side, but very fun deck, and very effective, very consistent. We wouldn't see a deck survive this long if it wasn't consistent. Even Shaman meets all those requirements. The next deck we're going to look at is going to be the Odd Paladin deck. This is a deck that people thought would die after the most recent nerf to Level Up, which was a 5 mana, give your Silverhand recruits +2/+2 in Divine, or not Divine Shield, but Taunt. And a lot of people were like, oh, this deck's gonna die after that. But long and behold, the deck lives on, because who would have known summoning two 1/1s for 2 mana every single turn that synergize with almost every card in the deck is essentially powerful. So that card got replaced with Frostwolf Warlord. For those of you who are wondering why that card is in the deck, Frostwolf Warlord is a 5 mana, and most of the time it's going to be a 7/7 plus, because you're going to have at least 3, 4, even 5, 6 minions out when you play it. I've seen this card, I mean, playing against this card is exceedingly annoying, because like, you know they don't have level up on 5, so you don't need to clear the board as much till then, but then they drop this guy and you're like, oh my god, how do I kill this 5 mana 9/9, Jesus? And then you know, it hits you for a third of your life and you cry on the inside. But either way, again, if we look at all these decks, if we looked at the Shaman deck that we just covered, if we look at this deck right here, and even the deck that we're going to cover next, it's mostly minions with a very like light sprinkle of spells. I mean, this deck we have like Blessings of Might, Divine Favor, and that's it for the spells. The next deck we're going to cover is going to also have very, you know, low spells, high minions. The Even Shaman, again, only had a Hex and Earthen Might. So a lot of these decks, what makes them so powerful is the fact that most of the time you're only worrying about what minion to play next. What do my minions do? What should the combat on the board look like? You're not intertwining spells and minions together for synergies or combos and what to use, when to use it. It's just all minions. So it completely almost eliminates half of the cards that you'd have to worry about, because most decks, most control decks that is, they actually have more spells than they have minions. So you really have to figure out, when do you play your minions, when to do your spells. Is this the right spell for this situation? Do I need to save this? These decks don't care about that. They just play the minions. You play the best minion almost every turn, and if your opponent doesn't deal with it, you win. And that is what makes these decks so popular, so favorable, consistent, and in my opinion, some of the easiest decks to play in the game. So again, even our Odd Paladin, everything synergizes well together. It's about making dudes, put them on the board, and buffing those dudes. The deck's been around for a while, so I don't want to explain it too much. Again, fairly cheap, 5,000 dust for a tier 1 deck that will carry you. It won't just carry you to legend. It has the potential to get you to legend. So if you're playing this deck and you're like, I can't hit legend, this deck sucks, that's not true, because this deck has gotten thousands of people before you to legend. So it's not, sometimes it's not the deck, guys. I'm not trying to be mean at all. I've had complaints. I was like, Rob, you know, this odd rogue that you played, it sucks. It's like, well, that deck got me to legend with an 82% win rate. I don't think the deck sucks. Maybe you're just not playing each turn as optimally as you should. The next deck we're going to take a look at is going to be the most expensive deck amongst the list, and it's probably going to be the best list, in my opinion, among the all of the decks that we have, just because I think it's favorable just almost against every single deck that's currently out there, and that's the Deathrattle Hunter deck. This deck has everything it needs to beat almost any kind of deck, and if it draws correctly, it beats just about everything. It has an early game that's pretty solid with Candleshots, Hunter's Marks, Devilsaur Eggs, Prince, and, you know, the Play Dead to pop the egg to make 5/5s. If you don't need to really pop the egg, you're playing it a little bit slower. You know, you can use play deads and Terrascale Stalkers on stuff like Carnivorous Cube for huge amounts of value. You know, playing a 1-mana play dead on a Carnivorous Cube to make an extra 2 Grizzlies, 2 Ziliacs, 2 Charged Devilsaurs, 2 King Crush. I mean, the burst of this deck is crazy. So not only does it have burst, it has, you know, the ability to go super late game just because not only the minions in the deck, but also because it runs Deathstalker Rexxar, and it also has the early game potential. Plus, it runs Prince, so if you draw Prince on 2, everything in your deck's buffed, and you can actually win without using any sort of combos. You could just beat down your opponent just because you have Prince and a bunch of minions in the deck. And again, looking at the deck list, bunch of minions, very, very, very few spells. And this is probably, again, I don't want to say it's the easiest out of all of the decks, but it's definitely not one of the more difficult decks to play for the amount of deck, because normally you look at the dust count of this deck and it competes with other control decks, but other control decks are much harder to play than, for example, this deck right here. Not to say that the deck is brain dead, just to say that there's a reason people don't tend to sway to play the most complex, hardest, complicated, you know, non-consistent decks on ladder. People want to play easy, fast, and they just want to win, and that's why these decks are the most popular. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, you know, you want to win, you got to play some of these decks sometimes. You're feeling down one day, play some tier 1 deck, destroy some people playing meme decks, mow the lawn, get it done. Oh my gosh, you'll have a blast. All right, moving on to Odd Rogue. This is the exact same deck list that we were referring to earlier. We were able to hit Legend. Like one day I was like, we were playing Control Warrior, Control Mage, and I was just like, you know what? Let's stop playing 30, 45-minute matches, and you know, let's see if we can play some 5-minute games and see how this deck does. I hadn't played Odd Rogue before that for months. I was like, all right, let's give it a go. In 2 hours or less, I went from like rank 4 or rank 3 to Legend, 83% win rate, destroyed everything. I didn't feel worthy. And I'm sure we weren't playing the deck 100% correct either. But I mean, the deck just wins. Granted, this is 8,300 dust cost Odd Rogue. It can be much, much cheaper. You don't have to play this exact version with Captain Greenskin, you know, Myra's Unstable Element. This is just the one that I built. It worked out well. You can add in another Tar Creeper and Blink Fox instead of the, you know, 2 legendaries, and I'm sure the deck will perform just as good. Maybe it performs even better. Who knows? But this is a deck that basically you want to play the best minion every turn. You know, having 1 mana 1/3s is great. Hero power that gives you a dagger that's a 2/2 that kills off mostly anything in the early game and does the same amount of damage as a hunter weapon is crazy. And then on top of that, your turn 3 is Hench-Clan Thug, SI Agent, Vicious Fledgling, which has won many games. Having a 3-mana 3/3 that it left unchecked just wins games is absolutely insane. And then, of course, turn 5 rolls around. You got Scalebane, Fungal Mancer, Captain Greenskin, Leroy, Vile Spawn Slayer, and stuff like that. So this game normally closes out most matches before it gets to, you know, turn 9, where you would not normally play Baku. It's kind of the last card you'd ever play, but turn 5 and beyond is kind of where you're wrapping up the game in this particular deck. So with that, that wraps up our top 5, you know, most basically the best, easiest decks to play. I know the dust count isn't always favorable for you to free-to-play players, but these are the decks that you're, you know, that you should be looking to play if you're wanting, you know, some of the best decks to hit Legend or just to grind ladder with. For those of you who would like some more information, comment section below is for that. So a lot of people leave some good information there. If you have anything to ask, I'm sure I will get back to you. If not, a bunch of other people use as a great resource to kind of ask or learn more. And with that, hopefully you've enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next episode or on the stream. Of course, guys, thanks for watching, and happy whatever the hell day it is.